Thank you. Wrong video. One more time. So this is Dr. Bob Bullard, and Reverend Cynthia will know this name, I think, because he actually was one of the folks that started in Warren County way back when, and is considered the father of environmental justice. And let us see if this will play and you can all hear.
The environmental justice movement redefined what environmentalism is and what the environment is. The environment is where we live, work, play, worship, learn, as well as the physical and natural world. It's all of that. The environment is wildlands, wilderness, wetlands. It's about whales, polar bears, birds, ducks, but it's also about urban, inner city kids being poisoned with lead. It's about kids playing on playgrounds that explode. Or your neighborhood fence line with so much dangerous stuff that you worry every day, 24/7, that something is going to happen, an explosion is going to happen, and if it does, you're at the fence line, you're going to die. So when we talk about environmental justice principle, environmental justice based in principle, all communities are entitled to equal protection of our environmental laws, housing, health, transportation, civil rights. So we're talking about basic human rights. The right to breathe is not a privilege. Most of us do not decide on Tuesday we're not going to breathe. So the right to have safe food that's nurturing. So when we talk about air and water and food, these are basic human rights, universal, that nobody has the right, or no organization, or no government has the right to take away. And we know what a permit is. A permit, depending on what part of the country, a permit is nothing more than a license to pollute at some level. So when we say, no, our health is not for sale, and that you should not be getting a permit to pollute me and poison me and experiment with me, because that is not informed consent. You can't do that with humans when you're doing human subjects, so you should not be able to do it in communities. 1987 was another year when the United Church of Christ Commission for Racial Justice commissioned this study to look at toxic waste and race in the United States. And what they found is that race was the most important variable to predict where these hazardous waste facilities are. No, not property values, not income, not education. Race was. And this study still stands today in terms of the methodology. It used very sophisticated statistical techniques, multiple regression and path analysis, and did all this, what it needs to do to isolate what the variables are in terms of their predictability and in terms of how much weight or power it explained. And race was. 1990 is another year. The idea of these young people, they are so brave, fearless. I mean, these trucks are carrying poison, and the police are protecting the trucks that's carrying poison, and these young people are putting their lives on the line. I said, damn, these are some brave kids. That picture is so powerful, that should be on a book. When I wrote Dumping in Dixie in 1990, there was no book out on environmental justice, environmental racism, and I finished the manuscript in 1990, and I sent it to a dozen publishers, got rejection notes that was hateful, insulting, and just plain out just telling me off. How dare you put race in the environment? The environment is neutral. Everybody is treated the same in the environment. Justice, there's no such thing as environmental justice. How can you say that the environment is unjust? And say environmental racism? The environment can't be racist. I got all those letters. You know, rejection is a mother. But for me, that was like, I'm getting this book published. I went to, as I said, I finally went to Westview Press in Boulder, Colorado. Now, Boulder is different. You ever been to Boulder? Boulder's different, a little different. They said, okay, we'll publish your book. Boom. They published the book. It was 160 pages. And I was done. I had gotten the book published, and I was done. And I got the first royalty check. It was a huge check with a bunch of zeros.
And he has been at it ever since. If you go to bobbullard.org, I believe it is, he has a lot of information on there, and he's active today and is an icon in this field as well. What I'd like to do is turn it over to our esteemed panelists to speak about the issue as they see it in their communities. And Haneef, if you could unmute yourself, sir, perhaps, and you could talk a little bit about what's happening down in Southbridge and as you've seen things.
Sure. Thank you, John, and thank you to everyone who has organized this event this evening. I appreciate you inviting me to be a part of this panel. Becoming the recent vice president of the Southbridge Civic Association really introduced me into environmental justice. Just last year, the Southbridge community did a Southbridge Neighborhood Action Plan to address the issues of the community and also to create a 5-year strategy plan to improve the community. And one thing that was identified in our neighborhood plan is that Southbridge is overburdened by environmental harms and risks present in the community. Based on available data, Southbridge and Wilmington as a whole has higher prevalence for negative health conditions compared to Newcastle County, the rest of Newcastle County. High rates of disease and illness implies that foundations of health and wellness are built on shaky ground in the Southbridge neighborhood. And we are working on identifying ways that we can improve things like air and water quality, right? Another major issue in Southbridge is sea level rising and flooding. Southbridge has always experienced flooding issues, but reports say that there is a 25% chance that we could see a 4-foot rise in sea levels in the Southbridge area by the year 2100. And if this were to be true or accurate predictions, the wetland park and the current infrastructure of Southbridge would not be enough to protect it from flooding. Now, to keep in mind that Southbridge is known from having brownfields and other toxic areas in the soil within the community, flooding would easily spread a lot of toxic pollutions if the sea levels were to rise or flooding is not addressed. So those are two things that we have in our neighborhood plan. We have been looking at saying how justice, potential Justice 40 resources could help. But the more I'm understanding is Justice 40 will be like a lot of technical assistance for projects that may be underway, but hopefully I can get more clarification tonight. One thing I will just end at is I never looked at it as environmental racism, and I learned something new already on this panel tonight. But one way I see it prevalent in the Southbridge community is we recently had a park redone that we just almost had to beg the city to redo Barbara Hicks Park on Bradford Street in Southbridge. I even played in it as a child, and it was the same park since I was little. And last year, they decided to renovate the park, and it looks great on the surface with the new basketball court and the new play areas and paving. But what happened is it was identified that some of the soil that was turned over was contaminated with toxins. And even after DENREC being notified and discussing this with Southbridge Civic Association and residents, to this day, that soil has still not been erected, or, that situation has not been corrected. It's just a little fence, and not even real fencing, just like an orange plastic saying don't come on this area. So when I just heard the good brother talking about being on the fence of toxic areas, that's a sign right there that if we get heavy rains in the Southbridge neighborhood, it's no telling what that rainwater will bring into the community with untreated soil like that. And that has to be environmental racism, because if this was a park in one of the finer areas or high income communities within Delaware, I doubt that toxins on top of the soil levels after a park getting renovated will remain for months on top of months. But I appreciate sharing today. I hope to learn more. I'll put my email in the chat. And if anybody wants to collaborate, our environmental justice subcommittee is headed by Victor Perez, who does a lot of work out of the neighborhood house, is a contracted researcher with the University of Delaware.
Thank you, Haneef. I heard recently that there are still folks in Southbridge that have yet to get back into their homes after Hurricane Ida that came through a year ago. Is that right?
I don't know that to be accurate for any residents that were looking to return back. Now, there may be residents who did relocate after that, but I don't know of any, me personally, that wanted to come back that are still not, or that are still displaced from there.
It can last a long time. I appreciate your thoughts, sir, on that. I'm going to turn over to my friend Leveda, who has been working from a health aspect, the communities in Wilmington for a long time. She's been a mentor of mine. And Leveda, if you could speak a bit what your experience is, we would really appreciate it. You are there, Leveda, I hope, still. I don't see Leveda. I'm going to see if I can't bring her back in again. But so I'm going to ask or put Jane Schaefer on the spot here a little bit as well. Jane, you are here. And one of the things that Jane has mentored me on for a long time is the impact of heat events. Jane, if you are here, could you speak to that a little, unmute yourself and speak to that a bit?
Jane, you're still muted.
I can't quite hear you, John.
He wants you to speak to the heat issue that you and he worked on for so many years.
I can't tell you right now. You tell him.
Okay, well, I'll go ahead and do that. Jane, as having a background in nursing as well, on that, brought it to my attention a lot of years ago that heat in urban areas can be extremely and is extremely dangerous. That I'll harken back to in the late 1990s in Chicago, there were almost 800 people that died because of one heat wave. And they were typically in areas where there weren't any shelters available to them. The folks were at risk. They did not have a good social connection in there. So at the end of the 3 or 4 days, when the temps were averaging over 100 degrees, that they found that there were hundreds and hundreds of low-income, at-risk folks that had passed away. And as it turns out, that heat is extreme heat is the one disaster, weather-related disaster, that kills more people worldwide than any other weather-related disaster on it. And the kicker is that it's something that can be addressed. That while we can't turn down the heat outside, but we can make provisions to help one another out as well. So I wanted to bring that to our attention, and because it's something that really needs to have everybody involved in. You know, there's a house of faith in almost every corner in Wilmington that could be utilized with some coordination as a temporary relief cooling center or shelter on that, which we're hoping to pilot soon and then get off in a little more robust way next year. But Jane was the one who helped get this going, at least get our attention on it to where we could work with other folks to help make that a reality coming forth, that we be able to start to address it. And it's something that doesn't take a lot of money to do. Representative Lambert, if you could unmute yourself and talk about your perspective on this, and clearly there's folks that have an interest in J40, and then I think the mapping tools that you're working on there would be of interest as well.
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. It's so nice to be here with everyone. I want to thank you all for your leadership, Interfaith. Thank you, John, Peggy, Cynthia, Susan, everyone. I'm so honored to be here with so many environmental justice champions. This panel that we're on, Haneef, Miss Owens White, Brother Ty Johnson, great panel, and others. For me, my background is in environmental justice. I was an active member of the Delaware Concerned Residents for Environmental Justice before I came into office. I was very active when it came to the Crota ethylene oxide leak, where thousands of gallons of a highly flammable carcinogen was leaked right next to residential communities where my brother and both of my nephews live. It was that fight back in 2018 when that happened that led me to also run for office. Growing up in Claymont, an area that is right in the footprint of the Marcus Hook Industrial Corridor, I grew up in an area where we had shelter-in-place emergency alerts come to us. I grew up in a place where sometimes the air would be orange. There's 9 contiguous, overburdened communities just north of Claymont, extending from Marcus Hook all the way through Pennsylvania. My role today here isn't as an activist, it's as a legislator. I'm honored to now serve in Delaware's General Assembly, and one of my wonderful colleagues, Representative Paul Bombach, is in the meeting today here too. We're here to listen, we're here to learn. When I first came into office, my first bill, House Bill 222, was around childhood lead poisoning, requiring blood lead screening by 2 years of age. A companion bill, House Bill 485, would have created better transparency between our school nurses, early childhood care providers, to make sure that they had better communication when it came to lead screening results. And just a week ago, we had this incident. We had the revelation of 47 schools testing positive for lead exposure. Now, when I pushed forward with my bill, I got resistance. Some of these same agencies that are doing the best that they can, but weren't sufficient for our young people, were the same agencies blocking this ability for us to have better transparency and communication between our schools and the Department of Health. It's imperative that we continue to work together and get legislation done at the state level that keeps our communities as safe as they need to be. I won't go through the environmental justice bills that I worked on. I want to fast forward to House Concurrent Resolution 40 that I passed last year, my first year in the General Assembly. The website is de.gov. de.gov/justice40. And you have to capitalize the J, de.gov/justice40, justice40. I was honored my first year to bring forward the nation's first Justice 40 Oversight Committee. When President Biden came into office, his third executive order was on climate change. And his climate change executive order 14008 included what he referenced as the Justice 40 Initiative. It established that when it comes to federal infrastructure funds around climate change, green energy, sea level rise, et cetera, that when it comes to those federal infrastructure dollars going to the 50 states, that at least 40% of those investment benefits go to overburdened communities. This oversight committee is here to make sure that when those investments come into our state, that at least 40% of those investment benefits goes to the communities that need them most. Communities like Southbridge, where Haneef was referencing some of the issues. Communities like Sussex, where Maria Payan serves. Our committee does not disperse funds. We don't function as the agency heads. We function as oversight. So that committee is made up of members of secretaries from DNREC, Department of Labor, Department of Housing, Agriculture, some other agencies. We're here to make sure that we not only review the issues that are going on, but we started with listening. We started with 3 community listening sessions. And when we talk about our interfaith community, our faith-based leaders, we really honor them. And one of our first meetings was at the Muslim Center in Dover. We thought it was imperative to make sure that we met the people where they were. So around this time last year, we had meetings at the Milford Senior Center in Sussex, the Muslim Center and Muslim Community Center in Dover, and then the PAL on Market Street, the Police Athletic League on Market Street in Wilmington. And in fact, the community attendance was so strong at the PAL Center that we had to open up the partition wall so that more people could come in. Our communities have solutions. They know what they need. What we need to do is listen. Yesterday, I had some of my national friends come into town that are members of the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council. I've worked with them when I've traveled to DC for environmental justice, Louisville, New York. And I'm honored that they came to Delaware to take a look at some of our issues. They were particularly looking at some of our issues up here in Claymont, legacy pollution issues from the old Claymont steel site, PCBs in the soil, other metal issues. We have flooding issues. We're right along the Delaware River from sea level rise, but I also took them down to the Route 9 corridor because these issues are greater than just one community. These issues are abundant. So I did just want to have that a little introduction into Justice 40, what it is. That website right there is basically the landing page. It has the YouTube links for all 4 of our Justice 40 meetings that we've had thus far. We're looking forward to having another meeting right after Election Day. And you did also want me to share a little bit about the screening tool. So the screening tool, the White House Environmental Justice, I believe it's called the White House Environmental Justice Climate Screening Tool. That is the beta version is available now. So what it does is it can zoom into your local census tract anywhere in the nation. And it also separates out in detail all of the different social determinants of health, the pollution indicators. So I'll wrap up here and I'll provide you all with the link so you can have a better visibility of it. But again, this is a dialogue. I want to hear from you. I want to make sure that this is interactive. And I'm honored to be here. This is my freshman term in the legislature. And if my community will entrust me with their vote, I look forward to coming back in November. Thank you, everyone.
Representative Lambert, we really appreciate that. We talk about the legislature and what is happening or frankly not happening this year. And we are not far away from voting, right? As Larry is reminding us on that there was a bill that was started in the Senate, passed in the Senate. It's called SB 305, which was the Delaware Climate Solutions Bill. That was one vote shy of getting through the House and becoming law. And I think, and I'm positive that the Representative Lambert and also the other folks on here as well, Paul Bombach, were supporters of that, but we were just one vote short of getting it out of the committee in the House. So we need folks to be contacting their legislators, the people that are running, and making sure that they know that this is important. That one vote would have made a big difference here in Delaware as well. So it's critical that we express our desires and our needs through voting and through letters to our legislators as well. On this call is John Irwin, who is very much involved in that as well. And John, maybe you can put something in the chat about how folks can get involved and as we move forward on this, because I think the Sierra Club has some things about voting and voting in legislature as well. So perhaps, John, you might put something in the chat for people to be able to connect into that as well. So anyway, that's pretty important. I have looked at that screening tool on that, and that takes you right down to the census level on that, and you can see where pollution is high. You can see where other things are impacting folks, and it's surprisingly bad, if you will. There's so much toxicity out there as well, and things that we need to do about it. So I guess maybe we can start looking at some questions. One of the issues that is pretty notable, especially up in Newcastle County, is asthma. So I would put that on the table for the panel to talk about asthma, and how can we have an impact on that? How serious is it, and what can we do about that as people of faith? Well, I'll throw out one idea on that there is federal money available for electric buses, but it's not being allocated yet, and our school districts aren't taking advantage of that yet. So John's go ahead.
Yes, I would also say it was 2 years ago, I believe, during Lent, our denomination had a big push for clean air. And our particular little congregation in Newark, got a notification that one of the top 100 air polluters in the country was in Delaware. And what were we doing about it? It was Crota, which of course affected the Route 9 corridor. And of course the Route 9 corridor have finally come together, but Crota was very negligent after they had their accident and so forth. So that's air. It ties into what John was saying with various lung issues, including asthma. And I guess part of my question is always, I am a white, fairly affluent, privileged person who is a part of a congregation that is mostly white, but I'm not directly affected. And so what should I be doing to be an ally to people who are being affected and for whom I think things ought to be better?
Haneef, you want to take a shot at that?
Sure, I didn't know how the conversation was going to flow. I was just waiting to unmute. So it's a lot of ways that I think that partnerships can be had. One, in the new idea that John just shared with cooling centers and faith-based community, faith-based houses of worship. I think that's an excellent idea through the summers, which would lead to more community building with faith-based institutions in the communities. I think when you operate programs like that, you could easily tie that into environmental education, educating people. There are some people in some of these underserved or impoverished communities who know in a general sense that things aren't 100% healthy, but they don't know the specifics about the types of toxins that are in the soil, about the effects of the sea level rising. I'm just now becoming aware, as I said, having a lot to do with the South Bridge neighborhood plan. So there are ways that to partner within that. Also, a lot of times when you look at environmental racism or any systems of oppression that continue to exist that create cycles within urban or Black and Brown communities, we have to be able to provide the resources to the communities. So where I understand now that, and I'm grateful for Representative Lambert bringing a justice for the oversight to Delaware. So now the dollars will now be tracked. But communities have to understand when the dollars come in. And if there are private dollars or resources that could be made available for projects to create better air quality, better water quality, better soil quality in these underserved communities, then, if that's an interest, I could definitely build with people to explain how that bridge could be built as well. But off top, that's how I would respond to that.
Appreciate that. John Irwin just posted something about California standards for automobiles. John, unmute yourself and explain that a little bit, please.
Yeah, thanks. So the California has, been a leader in transportation and cleaning up the air because they started off with just the worst air in the country, and so they have had an exemption to have more aggressive rules to clean up the car sector, the transportation sector, because their air was so bad. But because they got that exemption to do more than the federal government did, lots of other states have wanted to follow in their footsteps, and Delaware is one of those that has taken steps in that direction. Last March, Governor Carney said that when California completed figuring out what they're going to do for their advanced clean cars rules, which were going to make less pollution and to accelerate the change from gasoline-powered cars to electric cars, that he would adopt that for Delaware. So California did complete that process, and so there's a task force now that's starting to look into the details of how to do that. But we need to keep the pressure on the governor to make sure that he follows through with that he doesn't get cold feet and back away from his commitment from last March. So that link that I put in the chat is for a letter campaign where you can click on the link, put in your personal information, and then either change the letter or accept the letter as drafted to the governor saying, please, follow through on this campaign. This is important because of air pollution. We know that there's terrible air pollution in the most disadvantaged communities, but throughout Delaware. And getting clean cars, the transportation sector is the largest single sector for Delaware and the whole country for carbon, greenhouse gas emissions. So it's both a pollution issue and a climate issue. And so that's what I put that in there. That's something we're working on right now. We want the governor to act by the end of the calendar year so we can move forward on this transition to cleaner cars, and reducing the air pollution that is causing so many health problems.
John, Representative Bumbach put a link in for SB 305. I mean, either I didn't listen well or I didn't hear it alluded to. What is SB 305?
Representative, you want to explain that, or shall I?
Oh, no, go ahead. It was discussed, so I just put it in to back up the discussion that had happened.
I appreciate that. It was a bill that was started in the Senate last spring. In fact, John Irwin and others worked diligently to put this together that would mandate that DNREC take the lead on working with the other agencies that report up to the governor to look for real solutions to get us to reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. And I believe the target was 50% by 2030, and then to basically zero by 2050. And it would have chartered DNREC to be the lead agency for that, but also required the other agencies, DHSS, transportation, et cetera, to be working with them to identify areas where they can reduce the greenhouse gas pollution on air. And it would have required updates periodically as well. But it actually got through the Senate and got to the House, I think about maybe 2 weeks before the session was over. And at the in the committee, environmental committee, it was one vote shy of getting from the committee onto the floor, and there was enough sponsors to have it passed. So we were one vote out of 40 some from being able to get that bill passed. It would have made a big difference as well. I think I would also ask Representative Bombart and Lambert if they have any sense, or if they could kind of explain how all these billions of dollars are going to get from the feds down to action here in Delaware. How does that money run through Delaware to where we're going to be able to see it in our communities?
I'll start, since Larry's about ready to unmute. It's like a lot of the big federal legislation where it gets passed and then it takes months for them to come up with the details of how it gets into the hands of the state, and the state's typically the funnel through which it gets down to the individuals and the individual organizations. So if you look at the Inflation Reduction Act, which is the largest legislation for climate change, not only in our country, but in the world, it's going to take us quite a while to get to all the details. I think we've got a high level picture of that, but the details I think are still largely being determined. And one of the things we saw during the pandemic is Congress doing, billions and trillions of dollars, and having the headlines of we've done it, but it still takes weeks and often months before those dollars actually make it to the streets and make a difference. So it's gigantic dollars. It will take years to see all the impacts, but I think they're trying to prioritize some of the what they can get that faster, and then build out some of the others. So one example is the EV infrastructure. I think that they're working on getting the charging stations along all the highways, with certainly every 50 miles. Once they get that, then they'll start working on the secondary roads. And so they're prioritizing, let's get the most critical things done first, and then we'll build out the rest of it. That's one example where they're staging some of that policy.
Absolutely. And I also wanted to mention that, like Representative Bombach said, it's a work in progress. Our next Justice for the Oversight Committee meeting, we're going to deal with that specifically. That's why I think that this discussion right now is so timely during Peace Week, this discussion of what does it look like? How will the funds come in? So we're going to have Greg Patterson on, who's kind of overseeing the infrastructure funds coming in. So we're just going to have that introductory discussion. And one of the things that we like about our Justice for the Oversight Committee is that although we have all of our agency heads, we have the 6 members of our General Assembly, we also have some community ambassadors there as well, because I wanted to make sure that if we're going to have a meeting about the community, we're going to have the community there as well. And Peggy, when you mentioned earlier, how can you be an ally? That's what it is. It's all about listening. It's about showing up. And it's about getting your hands dirty sometimes too, you know. Sometimes we have to do the work. We got to show up. So many of you have really done that, and that's why we honor you. We appreciate you. I did want to add 2 quick things. In regards to that screening tool, there are good things about it, but there's also some challenges. We noticed that down in Sussex, some of the areas like Wharton's Bluff, Possum Point, some of the areas dealing with some of the livestock waste runoff, that they're not really expressed properly in the screening tool. So during this time, it is possible for you to submit your data, submit your input towards that screening tool so that they can tighten it up. And that's what I have for, another thing that Haneef mentioned too, which is in regards to looking at the funding and where it goes. We also want the communities also interested in looking at where some of these environmental fines go. So last year, we all know about that $50 million settlement with DuPont in the state. Well, the community wants to know, where does that money go? So, you know, from a legislative standpoint, we also want to make sure that the community can have an easier, smoother experience in regards to ensuring that those funds go back to the communities that were negatively impacted the most.
Following those lines, I would, one of the things that I've heard over the years and seen it is that the folks that are suffering the most of these environmental injustices don't often get a chance to sit at the table where the decisions are made. How if somebody wants to voice their opinion, their need, how do they find out even what tables are there to where they can try to become a part of the decision making?
Well, go ahead, Representative, please.
Oh, okay. And yeah, I don't want to, take up too much of the space. I want to make sure I'm sharing it. For me, being a part of groups like this, Interfaith is an outstanding place to start. Delaware Concerned Residents for Environmental Justice, Maria Pion's group down in Sussex, Shen and everything. There's numerous organizations doing the work, and I think that that's always a great place to get a little foundation. And for me, when I saw that advocating from the outside wasn't getting me the results that I was looking for, I decided to run for office and try to impact things from the inside out. So, just you being here is an outstanding start. Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, I would add the Sierra Club to that. I also want to mention that I mentioned before I referenced the Inflation Reduction Act. One of the things that has built in is additional incentives for green energy that is applying to lower income communities. So the Congress and the president put in really some extra benefits to help marginalized communities. I think that was a really good step that was built into that.
I'll go ahead and add on to that. Thank you, Representative Bombach. That working through Energize Delaware and through the Empowerment Grant Program, there are monies for nonprofit organizations like churches, especially low-income churches, to be able to get free energy audits and get grants to be able to help them fund the efforts that are needed. And then them being a center of excellence, if you will, they can spread that kind of information out into the community. There was one program that I'd like to highlight that was done in West Center City at Temple United Church. Pastor John Graham, he had some folks working from within the community who were building window inserts that would go to members of the community to be able to keep out the winter cold and keep in the heat in the wintertime. as many of you know, that for a low to moderate income folks, utility bills are at a percentage higher than many other folks on that. So they're spending a lot of money on utilities on that. These window inserts can cut back the amount of money that they're spending on heat. There was a grant that came from Empowerment Delaware that paid for that up to $100,000, and there were something like I think 60 homes that were able to get interior storm windows, and that they're easy to build. We put them together in the basement and then one of the other rooms in that church, and it employed 4 people from the community, working part-time, who are returning citizens. So it's that kind of thing that can be done within the community with money coming in through the state. And they're looking for more people to do that kind of work. So I would strongly recommend, if anybody is interested in doing that they should check with Energize Delaware, and they can get you to the right people for both the grants for churches getting more energy efficient, plus the Windows of Hope program, it's called.
There's been information, if people haven't looked in the chat, about electric vehicles. A number of things have been posted on there.
Let's open it up to lots of folks if you have questions or comments on that. So if you have, and I'm going to ask Cheryl to help keep track so we don't lose anybody on that. But if you have any questions for the panelists or for anybody here or comments, please raise your hand either electronically or visually, and let's get some more dialogue going. Susan?
Yes, hi. Thank you so much for doing this and bringing us together. I am aware, I just became aware last night of, I'm on the health committee of the Newark NAACP chapter, and I just became aware last night. Are you hearing me all right?
Yes.
Yep.
Good. Of the biogas project down around Seaford, and I'm sure you're aware of that. It's I mean, and it could be an extraordinarily effective project, but I have concerns. We have concerns about its location, and of course, it's very important that the design and operation be exceptional, no matter where it's put. But that kind of project can sequester a lot of junk, methane, produce methane, and add to the grid and so on. But I have a lot of questions about that. I guess what I'm asking is there actually a good coalition of folks, a coordinated effort to understand that and get the details of it and try to make sure that it's safe and so on? That would be my question. Thank you.
I'm glad you asked. I'm going to ask Gerald to capture some of these as well, and then I'll put some additional information after the call, and maybe we can take the information that's in the chat plus some of these other ones and send it out to email of everybody who signed up here. But to answer your question directly on that, yeah, there is the biogas project that's going in around the Seaford area, and it's almost got approval. It's gotten through DENREC, and they're taking it before a county council in Sussex. IPL did look at that, Interfaith Power Light did look at that as a potential problem. And our first blush was just what you said, that it looked like the technology could be good on that, because it does take chicken droppings and like that, and then process them, turn it into methane, which gets added to the methane distribution here in Delaware. The issue that I was unaware of, and actually caused me personally to change my mind, is that The location is the issue in a number of ways. It's located fairly close to a large Hispanic community
Yeah.
down there. And they are going to be bringing in big diesel truckloads of material, which will bring in lots of diesel fumes into the community.
Mhm.
So it's going to have a harmful impacts, Susan, on the people that live around there.
Right.
Even though the technology itself may be neutral.
Yeah. No, that's our big concern, the location and the vulnerable community there.
That's exactly right. And I think tomorrow there is a public meeting online information session, and I don't
Yes.
have quick access to it, but I'll ask Gerald to pass that out when we finish here for people to, if they want to dial into it and learn about it.
Marita has had her hand up because I think she has information about it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks. So, yes, I'm glad that everyone asked, and I will be on that panel tomorrow night. Food and Water Watch is actually putting on a panel which will go through the mechanics of what it actually is. I think Greg Layton and Dustin Thompson of Sierra Club is also going to be on that. So that was a huge problem, is the fact that this was put into an area that is zoned ag residential, which according to Sussex County zoning code is not permitted in that. It actually came in as an amendment to a composting permit. Originally, it was represented that this was going to take chicken litter and prevent the runoff. Out of the 200 and I believe 50,000 tons of waste coming in, only 12% will be chicken litter. The other 88% will be processing plant waste from the poultry processing plants on Virginia, Maryland, and Delaware. So we're going to take the tri-state processing plant waste, not the small farmer helping it as it was presented, bring it into an area of Sussex County where within a half mile and a mile are the two closest communities. One is English as a second language Latinx community. The other is English as a second language Haitian community. To provide, let me give you some details here on an EJ screen that I just got for them. So this would be a $7 million anaerobic digester system to create what they're calling renewable natural gas. Renewable, it's a greenwash term for biogas, which is a form of methane produced when animal and agricultural waste are broken down by microorganisms in a large oxygen-free environment, typically a tank. Poultry litter, waste and sludge from Delmarva and potentially beyond would be trucked to the facility. Communities there within a mile radius are in the 80th percentile in the state for air toxics, hazardous air pollutants that are carcinogenic and can cause negative health impacts. That means only 20% of the state has more air pollution than this community here. It's also ranked in the 68th percentile for proximity to Superfund sites, and nationally, the area is in the 91st percentile, indicating only 9% of the USA lives closer to Superfund sites than the site here in Seaford. And I can go on and on with the facts, but the problem is this is very problematic. There is a Superfund site within a mile and a half of this facility now. Because of it being in a residential area, and you're talking about natural gas, it is highly flammable, meaning that there can be explosions. It is also supposed to bring in 20,000 tanker trucks per year. So you're talking about the pollution from the tanker trucks, the pollution from an existing composting area there. They're going to have flares, which you have emissions from that. So this is, and the sad part is they're having a public hearing October 28th. 6th online. It's on DENREC's public notice. But to date, the Haitian Creole community has had 0 notice put out in their language. And that is a civil rights violation. Okay? So what people can do, be the voice that the communities there are not having the option to be. In that community there, and we've had these discussions with DENREC, only in 4 households do not have access to internet. And even if they did have access, if it's not in their native language, right? If it's not in Haitian Creole, they can't participate. So that's a problem. That's a problem. The communities that are going to live there and be most impacted should definitely have a voice and have a seat at the table, and they do not.
Thank you,
There are a lot
Maria.
of defects that are produced by all this methane, mental and physical, and even a lot of births that don't occur. And I mean, it's horrendous, the effect. There's no reason that should happen to anybody.
And methane is one of the worst greenhouse gases
Yes.
of all of them as well. So any leakage is also going to contribute to the warming that we see. Thank you, Susan. That was a great question. And thank you, Maria, for enlightening us on that. Appreciate that. Other comments or questions? It's a good start.
Can someone share the link to that meeting in the chat, please? Thank you for this discussion. So.
Other thoughts? Well, I would ask one of the group in general, and where do we go from here? Because EJ is an ongoing issue. Environmental justice is not an easily solvable one, and it's not just something that we solve with legislation. I think everybody's got to get involved in one way or another, just like the climate issue. So I would ask, how do you see going forward here?
I think for me, next steps that I'm taking from this, I think I heard Representative Lambert loud and clear. We could be doing more to advocate and support environmental legislation when it's on the floor, whether that's House or Senate, and be more in tune with the process, as well as organizing in our own communities through our neighborhoods or through our faith-based affiliations, ensuring that we are speaking to our Delaware legislators on a regular basis when it concerns environmental justice. I think that we could launch neighborhood programs. I know, John, that you are already working on coordinating the cooling stations with churches and open to identifying more churches to be in that network. But I do believe there are ways that we can partner with faith-based communities within these neighborhoods and outside to provide small things that could help bring a better quality of living for individuals. And small things like water filters. You know, when we understand in some of these low income and impoverished communities, that the resources just to obtain some of the things that are so obvious to some of us are so hard to obtain. So, you know, certain communities in Sussex, throughout Wilmington, and that needed the most, providing spring water on a regular. cases and jugs of water, just a partner to identify. And it doesn't have to be hundreds or thousands of people. If you identify one community that's in need and you were able to help that community on one day, or to help that community do something that will help that family for a long term, then that's a big difference. So I think we could do a lot of little things, but I think it's very important that we all be mindful of what's going on in Dover when it comes to environmental reform.
There's a phrase that I learned a long time ago. It's neighbors helping neighbors, and we're all neighbors. You know, so I think we got to remember that. I ask another question on that. How many of you are familiar with the concept of food deserts? Right, and why is that? Because a lot of the frontline communities just don't have good grocery stores on that. And there's some work that's being done in different communities. I've seen it happen in West Center City, in a couple places, of building community gardens. That there's lots of empty lots in Wilmington, as an example. You know, so that would be something that folks would get together as a group to help work on building a community garden on that. And I know that the Delaware Center for Horticulture loves helping folks to do that as well. So that's something that we can do together.
Have to make sure the soil is safe where you're
Yeah.
planning to do that.
Indeed. Indeed. Well, we put together a garden in West Center City. I helped put together a garden there, and we did a raised garden. So we fixed the soil problem by bringing soil in.
Great. Great. You solved the problem.
And there are vertical gardens too, you know, that don't take up a lot of space, but bring a little bit of fresh food. Other thoughts out there? Thank you, Haneef.
I have a real concern that there is no established response to disasters. I have talked to a number of people, and I know we have sent letters that absolutely no response by a government official. They just hide from the question. And I can't believe there's no response. We have had disasters. We're gonna have them. We need to be ready for them so that when something happens, people are not just left, you know, without anything. And there's a woman, Stacy Henry, who has taken upon herself to be available to help a lot of the people from Southbridge, the flooding, the people from Adams Street who were evicted because their buildings were condemned. And then there was something like 400 people who were in hotels because of COVID, who have just been dumped out of the hotels. The government, no more money for the hotels, get out. You know, I don't know. Is it for the faith community to set something up so we're ready to help?
Let us ask Reverend Cynthia, if you're still on, how would you respond to that?
Well, oh gosh, I think it's going to take community, not just faith communities. I think a lot of the time, what happens with what the work of faith communities is that we were only able to mitigate the effects rather than affect the systemic problem. And I think that's why we need to get everybody to, we need to do community organizing. And that's something I'm woefully ignorant about how to do. And I would love to be able to learn how to do that. And we're trying to do that with affordable housing here in Newark. There's a group of us, the Newark Interfaith Leaders Group. We're trying to start to bring pressure to the city about how can we have affordable housing in downtown Newark, because everything that's getting built, most of what's getting built right now in Newark is for people who can't afford to live downtown. But I'm of the opinion that it's not just up to faith communities, it's up to the whole community. And how do we do that?
Susan. I thought you were raising your hand. Larry, you were a community organizer. You are a community organizer after, both publicly and your work outside of government. How would you respond to that?
In regards to better emergency responses?
Well, I think what Reverend Cynthia was talking about was community organizing as a way of broadening the community who gets involved.
Absolutely. So I did want to acknowledge that Rep. Bombach and Haneef had raised their hands. In regards to community organizing, that's where it really all starts. Sometimes when we jump out from an individual standpoint, we may or may not have an impact. And sometimes, we need to just express. But if we're talking about actual power, the strongest thing that we have is people power. And if we're able to synergize our efforts and to break down some of these silos that separate us, one of the issues that we have in Delaware is the splintering and the duplication of efforts. So if we can find creative ways to synergize our efforts and speak with that strong collective voice, a lot more work gets done. We've mentioned some of the organizations here, and there are a lot more. I've really seen us be able to push legislation when you advocates are engaged. And I really love all of the wonderful topics that we've mentioned here. For example, when Maria mentioned that there isn't a Haitian translation for the meeting coming up, I will be sending an email. If I wasn't working on campaign finance stuff, I do it tonight. But we also need a flood of emails from everybody on this call, So we just want to make sure that when we talk about next steps and action steps and everything, that we begin with our overburdened communities and we step up and we do what they need. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Representative Bombach, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so several years ago when there was that oil tanker explosion in Canada, I had a constituent reach out and say, given that we've got the CSX tracks and the CSX trains with the oil cars coming through Newark, what are the plans? Well, I reached out to DEMA, the Delaware Emergency Management Agency, and I sort of had like a black helicopter come after me and put me up against a wall, and I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I set up a meeting, and before they would answer a single question, they started with, why the heck do you want to know? And essentially, are you trying to figure out how to bomb an oil car in Newark? So, but once we got past that point, they realized, that I was not an insane person. What I found was DEMA maintains, I'm going to say, they probably have rooms of binders of plans for emergencies. I'm not saying they're great, but I'm saying that plans exist. But also what we know, and Representative Lambert and I know this well, is that there are, with the pandemic, for instance, there's a lot of opportunities of lessons to be learned. And the state government often has these what's known as after action reports, where they look back and say, what did we do well? What did we screw up? And I think when we look at the flooding of Southbridge, what I would suggest is that we have local bodies. So that would be, elected officials, community leaders, faith leaders from the Southbridge area, reach out to DEMA and say, we'd like to know the status of the after action review of what happened with the flooding in Southbridge, so that the next time that happens in a community like Southbridge, let's not make some of those same mistakes. So I think that's one thing we can do is, we've got an organization, the state government responsible for this, for overseeing this, which is DEMA. Let's ask them, where does this stand? And I think that would be very constructive.
I would add on to that, I appreciate that. I would add on to that as we have these heat days, extreme heat days that people are suffering from, where are the notifications that these things are happening? That's another DEMA responsibility that extends out into each of the counties and each of the cities, that they should be letting folks know where the cooling centers are and letting folks know what they need to do to stay safe at home. And it just isn't happening like it's supposed to. Haneef, you have your hand up.
Yeah, and first I'll say thanks, Rep. Bomback, for that excellent suggestion. I will ensure that we do follow up with DEMA and ask about that. I did just want to respond to Reverend Cynthia's point, and I do agree it is community. And I know I am always interested in partnering and connecting with faith-based institutions, because a lot of time faith-based has the people who want to get involved, but it does have to be community as a whole. And I, by nature and by craft, am a community organizer. So if there are any faith-based leaders, community leaders that are interested in having community organizing training so that you can learn basic, and we can go to intermediate or advanced techniques to get people involved and create effective calls to action, I'm more than open to working with anybody. I'm sure we can find a way to make it work. I did put my email in the chat and could do again if people need it to be elevated.
That's an excellent idea, Haneef, and I'm sure that Interfaith Power Light would like to work with you on that. Maybe we can do something with our organization and you as our trainer on that, and set up a pilot, see how that works in Wilmington. It's a good outcome.
Sure, more than open to do that.
John, we are approaching 8:30, and we want to be respectful of people's time, understanding that we did get started a little late with our little technical glitch. But you might see if anybody has closing remarks.
Good question. Raise your hand or just popcorn up. Go ahead, Representative Lambert.
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for this very important meeting. You know, as we celebrate Peace Week, unfortunately, there's not a lot of peace in some of our overburdened communities. But you know, we can increase our visibility, we can improve our outcomes by working together. And I think that meetings like this are very helpful. Let's keep the dialogue going. Feel free to reach out to me anytime. Thanks again for having this. We appreciate everyone.
Thanks to everybody that showed up and had questions and comments. That's terrific. Appreciate it a lot. Susan, are you waving your hand or just saying goodbye?
She's on mute. You're on mute, Susan.
Hey, can I ask a question? Will the chat be part of what we get with the recording so we can have all these emails and access to them?
I believe he said yes, and I think that comes with it. Where is it? It was in the chat here.
I believe so. Gerald, can you make that happen?
Yeah, we'll make that happen. We'll make sure everybody gets a link to the video and the resource that was shared in the chat as well.
If you click on those three dots where you can type a message, there's a looks like a page, there's an emoji icon, and then there are those three dots. If you click on those three dots, you can save the chat now.
Yeah, you can save it to your own computer. Yeah.
Yep.
Renee, you had a question or a comment?
No, I was looking for the dots. Haneef, I need to, get with you. We used to come to Southbridge community meetings, our environmental justice people from First Unitarian Church, and then the pandemic came, and then Marie had her stroke, and we feel still disconnected. So we should talk, see how we can get back together.
It'll be my pleasure. And if you have troubles with the chat, John knows how to reach me.
All right, thanks.
Well, thanks again. I appreciate it. And thanks to Peggy for getting this started, and Reverend Cynthia for the great words kicking this off. Our two representatives, would love to have you on it. Thank you very much for your contributions, and everybody else. Maybe we ought to do this again sometime. I think it was a good chat, but maybe do it with a little less technical angst at the beginning.
And lunch. Oh, no.
Hey, we could probably get together in person sometime. That'd be great.
Lunch at the park. Let's do it.
That's it.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Oh, thank you.
Bye-bye.